Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Build Show. I'm John Peitzman, JP, certified high-performance coach and creator of the Build Framework. I work with individuals and teams all over the world to help them thrive in their personal and professional lives. And as your host on this show, our aim is to help transform lives one guest at a time. And we do that how? By having amazing guests. And today is absolutely no different. We have with us Her Royal Highness, Queen Diambi. In addition to all the amazing titles she is about to explain, Queen Diambi holds a doctorate in public administration, a doctorate of philosophy in humanities, a professorship in international law and order, a master of science in applied psychology, and a master of science in mental health counseling, having spent much time mastering issues relating to trauma and how it affects identity. Queen Diambi is a trained EMDR therapist and holds a degree as a practitioner of complementary and alternative medicine. She is also a certified math and French teacher and holds a Bachelor of Science in business finance and economics. To say that Her Majesty has impeccable credentials is clearly an understatement, and it is my true honor to welcome her to the Build Show as our very special guest. She is joining us via video technology from around the world in Los Angeles, California, as her travels take her today. And it is such a privilege to have her with us. Queen Diambi, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Greetings. Thank you so much, JP, for having me here today to share a bit of a space and time and to have this conversation. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure. And I must say, I practiced as much as I could to give your title justice, and I worked on it, and I realized I could not do it justice. So I did the introduction as I could, but I know that you have some very specific formal titles, and I would love for you to just take a moment to explain those to our audience and do so in a way that gives us justice, because I've tried, but I couldn't, so I thought that you'd be better placed to do that.
No worries, I'm familiar with that, and it's only normal because my titles really are in my own language, in the Congo, in Chiluba. So I will translate, of course, but I am Queen Diambi. I am Diambi Kabatuswila Chiyo Mwata Mukalenga Mukajiwa Nkashama wa Bakwaluntu wa Baluba wa Kasai wa Congo. So that's my name and title. So Queen Diambi. Diambi is, the meaning is the bearer of good news. Kabatuswila is my father's name, so that traced my lineage. And then Chiyo Mwata is the king from whom I hold, this staff of rural staff that I have. So I'm seated on the throne after his lineage, King Chiyo Mwata, and I'm the queen of the Bakwaluntu people of Kasai. And the Bakwaluntu are part of the bigger ethnic group that's called the Luba, and they are in the Kasai region in the Democratic Republic of Congo that is today. But we've been there for a couple of centuries. So I'm a traditional queen, and my title is actually female king, because a queen in our language means the woman who's married to a king. But since I am not married to a king, I am myself the king, but I'm a female. So I do sit on the throne, and that's why people will see me around, sometimes holding my royal scepter. That indicates that I'm a ruling queen on the throne. And so that's one of my titles. But I'm also Grande Mãe do Povo Bantu Brasileiro, which is great mother or queen mother of the African descendants of Brazil. So I was crowned in 2019 in Salvador de Bahia as a traditional queen representing the ancient diaspora, what we call the historic diaspora of African people who are in Brazil. And that's a couple of millions, I would say close to 100 millions of people. So I represent a bit of a bridge between the African diaspora of Brazil and the Africans of the continent, because I do a lot of work inspiring the reunification and the reconciliation of these different expressions of Africans in the world. And then the last one that I just got crowned 3 weeks ago in Panama, where I am now Reina de los Congo Descendientes de Panama. So I'm queen, traditional queen of the Congolese descendants of Panama. So those are my titles and qualities and a bit about my name.
Wow, and thank you for explaining that. I think the audience will understand how I struggled with trying to give that justice. So thank you for that. And before we jump into the build framework, I'm really looking forward to that conversation. Can you tell us what I'm sure there's many things, but what are you most excited about, like right now, as we sit here and have this conversation with what you're engaged in currently?
Well, I'm very excited because meeting you and meeting your network is only giving me a further opportunity to get my people known in the world. And when I say my people, of course, you can imagine it's pretty broad. It's not just about Kwaluntu people of Kasai, but it's to really speak about Africa and to speak about Africa in other terms that that it's usually referred to in the general media. I believe Africa has a huge image deficit, and it's of course due to the history of the continent, mainly a history of abuse and overexploitation, and really a lot of sad stories. But it's not the whole story. It's a continent full of abundant wealth in knowledge and wisdom and experiences and diversity, and it's vibrant. It has a lot of energy, a lot of great things to share to the world. And I feel like people in the world are getting cheated out of looking at Africa in other ways so that they can actually benefit from a lot that Africa has still to offer. That is not necessarily minerals and natural resources, but that is much more abundant in terms of cultural wealth, an historical perspective about humanity, and how different model of society or different economic models have appeared over the time that we've been around. And I love to remind humanity, that everyone is African, and I love to put it in perspective because people kind of like, if you went to school and you did a bit of anthropology, or when maybe they talked about human history and they talked about maybe a prehistoric time, you're thinking, oh well, we were in Africa when we were not so evolved, or we were not complete yet as humanity. However, I try to explain to people when I give them in perspective that if humanity is 100 years old today, that means that she would have left Africa when she was 82 years old. So that gives us a bit more perspective in knowing that we are indeed Africans all over the planet, and that our journey into the rest of the world is very recent. And then meaning that the abundant experience that we have amassed on the continent ought to be a bit more scrutinized and respected also. And I believe that we left the continent with all the element of civilization building. And we did quite well around the world, as we can see. So that's one of the things that I love, to make sure people understand what I'm coming with when I speak about Africa, and to basically get their curiosity. And maybe because they will learn about the continent, maybe they will also help reframe how they see the continent, and how they see themselves in the world, and how they see themselves contributing to that continent not doing so well, not in terms to guilt them, but to say maybe we ought to pay more attention about how we handle our relationship with that continent, because it's our mother after all. And it's also, for me, almost like a sanctuary for humanity. I feel like this is a place that we could test out new ways of being and new ways of building and new ways of so-called developing. And it could really be a prominent terrain to do so, and to make some corrections in so many different fields, including environment and urbanism and agriculture and so many other fields.
Absolutely. So let's talk more about that, and let's use the BUILD framework to do that. So for those of you who need a reminder of what BUILD is about, BUILD is an acronym, of course. It stands for Build Relationships, Understand the Business, Implement Strategies, Lead and Inspire, and Deliver Excellence. And with the opportunity to have Queen Diambi with us today, I thought we'd really focus on lead and inspire, because clearly, I mean, you can already tell there is a leader of leaders among us today. And I would love to have a conversation today about how you continue to lead and inspire, and really using the BUILD framework kind of as a context for that. Meaning, let's talk about each of the areas, and maybe you can share some insights and inspiration about how we all can lead and inspire in each of those areas. So if we talk about B first, build relationships. How do you lead and inspire in the area of building relationships? I must imagine that that's kind of the foundation of what you do in the world, is to make sure that those relationships are authentic and heartfelt and the rest of it. But what do you have to say about leading and inspiring as it relates to building relationships?
Well, you nailed it. In my stance, it's really the most fundamental assets, the ability to go towards others and to leave your comfort zone, to try, to meet with people where they are. I was crowned in 2016. And before I was crowned, really literally the minute before I was crowned, I really didn't know that I was going to be a queen. I didn't. I left Florida. I was a mental health counselor in Florida, and I went back to see my father in the Congo. And we went to, the village where he was born. And a few months before, my father had explained to me that, my name was the name of Queen Diambi, his grandmother, and his grandfather was King Chiomata. And it was the first time actually I heard any such thing from my father. So because of colonization, they had shamed people into wanting to connect and know their history. So a lot of Africans disconnected completely from the past, from the historical heritage, from the traditions and culture. So they completely cut themselves off, and they went off on to becoming as much assimilated to the Western model as possible. They thought this is the future, the West is best, so forget about the past, let it go. So I wasn't raised in a family where they talked about our history, they talked about our past. So my father never really talked about his grandparents, maybe his parents. That was really the most I knew, and we really didn't even know much, and I kept on asking why. So eventually in 2016, he writes a letter to explain to us that we were really from a royal home, and that was really striking because I was already 49 years old. And I was like, so I said, you mean to say that I'm a princess? And he was like, yeah. Well, I said, I wish I had known that earlier, because you can imagine as a Black girl, I didn't have a lot of princess representation in any sort of media or entertainment. So, it would have been nice to think of myself as being a real princess at the time I was growing up. But nevertheless, I didn't know I was going to be queen. So when we went there to the Congo, and the ceremony, as far as inducting us into our princess statue, myself and my sister, ended up being that there was another process where they did ask me, are you ready to take responsibility for your people? And I was completely surprised by the question, but I just answered yes. And it was a really a yes that, jumped out of my chest, and I really have still yet to understand exactly what happened. But of course, it was just a willingness of being of service. But once I became a queen, so right after that, they put the crown on my head, they gave me, my royal attributes and regalias and everything. And then that was it. It was like, okay, off you go. And I was like, what do you mean off I go? Where is the, Queen 101? Where is, Queen for Dummies? Where is, Elizabeth 911? Like, to explain to me how to be a queen. I was not prepared at all. And I was like, furthermore, a queen of a tribe in the middle of the forest in Africa. It's like, how do I live with that? How do I reconcile with that? What is it that I'm supposed to do? And of course, I understood very quickly that my role was really a representative role and also a symbolic role, where not just symbolic actually, because I also embody the experience of our forefathers. So I'm a sacred being because I represent the ancestors. But then I just didn't know what else I could do. And then I also knew that I had to do something because they didn't just pick me just because. So there was many reasons, and I felt, there was something I could add to or at least do something to improve their life, and starting to scrutinize the areas where I could do something with my life experience and all the careers that I've had. I'm an economist, you mentioned it, psychologist, and furthermore. So I realized, I really want to do something. But I was a psychologist in Boca Raton, Florida. I was not a state, leader or a world leader. Nobody knew me except my family and my friends. So how do I empower or help people of my tribe? So I had few monies in my bank account, a small thousandaire. And I said, well, I could take my monies and then just build a couple of wells, because we have an issue with water in the Congo, especially in the area, and just go build maybe 20 wells, and that's it. And then I will be broke, and that's it. What do I do now? My people will be absolutely happy. However, I would have not really done much. So I decided that no, I had to become a voice. I had to speak out. I had to find a way to mobilize and to rally for people to help me do that. So the only way is to build relationship. The only way is to to get out of your comfort zone and go towards others. So for several years, I really put a lot of emphasis in going towards others to make sure that they know who I am, to explain to them about my people, to talk to them about Africa in a different way, and to get their interest in saying, hey, I love what you're doing. I'm interested in doing that. Or, I'm doing something similar, and then I can learn from them. So the relationship is really about, going there with an open heart and an open mind to say, listen, I am of service, but I really don't know how to do stuff. I know some things and some things I don't. But as a leader, I needed to buff up my abilities. And to do that, you need to be partnering with other people in so many different ways. And I have gone all over the world. I've been received by world leaders and people in industry, in different fields, and in arts and fashion. And so my life has been so far very dynamic in really creating those pathways where we connect with each other, because relationship is not just so we can get stuff or give stuff. It's really about building something together. And I come back to the build. It's about building something together. It's co-creating together. So that's why I put a lot of emphasis on relationship.
Oh, I love that. And you've already talked about it, but we can segue right into it, which is the B, build relationships, leads into the U, which is understand the business, which you can only do when you effectively have those relationships, which you just articulated, right? You build relationships so you can understand where they're coming from, so they can understand you and the history and everything that you have to share more effectively and from the heart as well. So can you say more now about, as we take lead and inspire and kind of put that lens on understanding the business, how do you lead and inspire in that space of learning and development and understanding?
Yes, I think for me, a lot of the understanding comes from humility, having a lot of humility, because and accepting to be a perpetual student, because of course one person cannot possibly hold all the information that you need in order to perform well, but also you cannot possibly need to hold all this information. So you're going to have a bits and piece of it. Somebody else will have other pieces of it. And when you start putting yourself the pieces together, then you can solve, problems. So for me, it's about being, solution oriented. I see, of course, you have to have a really good sense of what is wrong. And so you have to be very inquisitive and also keep asking the uncomfortable questions about the model that you have in front of you. Examine, learn, think about solution, kind of play with your mind with, what could be, and also have conversations with all these people that are in leadership positions in whichever field that they are in, and to see how they have, overcome, some issues or some challenges, and what kind of added value they've brought into the life in front of them, what are the solutions they were able to craft and manifest. So you get a better sense of all of that. And then you get to increase your ability to sharpen your mind, to sharpen your tools, because you can acquire tools by having those amazing relationships that will bring you some help in structuring solutions. So this is really what I would say about that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love how, and coming from an actual queen, the humility being so important, right? I mean, if you can have humility, we all need to do our best to kind of step into that space and ask the questions, like you said, and understand that we don't know everything, and use those relationships to understand the business of whatever we're looking into, which leads, of course, to implement strategies, right? Which is so very important, because you can have relationships and then understanding, but unless you implement strategies, then you might not be going as far as you otherwise would be. So what do you have to say about leading and inspiring in the category of actually implementing strategies?
A lot, because of course, like I said at the beginning, I really didn't know, what would I do as a queen? And my model is quite different. I'm actually building the model. There's no queens out there like of my style, of my story, of my caliber. There's a lot of other queens out there that I established, or sitting on established kingdoms, and have had longevity and continuity in the power structure that they sit on top of. But in my case, I was sitting on, really unearthing a throne that had a couple of generation be basically almost decayed because of the slavery process and colonization, and so that's a few centuries of chipping away the glory and the power of the throne on which I sit. So I had to start somewhere, and the implementation for me comes in the fact that, okay, first, get the relationship, make an assessment. What are you good at? What could you do? What are the problems that you have on the ground? And then start to identifying the problems and then thinking now of the solution, because a problem is just a problem to me. Of course, needs a good assessment of, of the amplitude, of the quality of the problem. What is it exactly? Then you have to go to the solutions. Okay, you can cogitate, think about it, talk about it, but then you have to act. So implementing, this is it. It's like you have to start, creating a way, a structure in which you can actually act and bring the benefits that you want to see in front of you. So I started by creating a non-for-profit organization in New York, which is called the Elikia Hope Foundation, where it's, non-for-profit for projects such as orphanages in the Congo, bringing clean water to the Congo, building a small clinic for women's health, also bringing motorcycles, to people in the villages. So those are really the basic solutions. But of course, I cannot just stay there. I feel like, the reason why these problems are there, it's because it's structural. It's a structural problem for me that is much bigger than the problem that is a local manifestation of the problem. So what you see locally are just the symptoms of a bigger malady. And I believe the malady is a structural problem in the way our economic system works and how we have designed it, for things that may have been good in the past, but are not so much serving the majority today. So if the model is not quite good, then we have to start thinking about ways to make amend or make some changes. And this is why I get involved into new technologies, because I feel like new technologies could bring about, some tools so we can implement and make some changes. So in that path, I have also been able to be involved into development projects of how do we protect nature, for instance. I have a great Congo River project. How do we take the plastic out of the equation? How do we all use it if it's there? How do we clean the Congo River? How do we protect the forest of Central African Republic and the indigenous people that live there? So carbon credit solution, environmental friendly eco villages. So I get involved into all these spheres where I do meet amazing luminaries and visionaries that also are involved into these type of projects, maybe in different places in the world, but are interested to come to Africa because I have gotten this relationship going. So I got to interest many people, and also people seek me out now for kind of like consulting about implementing projects in Africa in infrastructure, mining, in agriculture, environment, energy projects. So people come to me, and of course I do have a team. I eventually get a consulting office where we do put together the partners to really see that the projects and the way we are structuring the projects are to the benefit, not just of the investors and the shareholders, but also the stakeholders, because that's where I stand. I stand right in the middle to say, wait a minute, how does that project work for the stakeholders, who are usually the population, who are, sometimes neglected, unfortunately, in those cutting deals, and also of course, the environment.
Love it. And I love how it's basically the build framework in action. I mean, you build the relationships to understand the business of what needs to happen. You even have a consulting office for that so that you can implement the right strategies, right, based upon the understanding, which is based upon those authentic relationships that you have, right? So it's really, really a flow that makes sense. Obviously, that leads to L, lead and inspire. That's what we're talking about today in all of the areas, right? You are obviously just demonstrating leadership and inspiration in all that you do. In going to leading and inspiring on D, which is deliver excellence, what do you have to say about, maybe what excellence even is for you, right? And how do you lead and inspire in that category of excellence, and how do you inspire maybe others to kind of deliver excellence in their lives?
I think that I would start by saying, finding out who you are. Determining your DNA. And when I say DNA, it's not just physical DNA, which is quite interesting, for everybody to do, because then you realize that you are really a melting pot of everybody on the planet. But it's also understanding your intellectual DNA and also your moral DNA, and kind of like what's your ideology? What do you believe in? What do you believe you are? What do you believe you are here to do? And once you pinpoint that, basically your sphere of talent, your sphere of passion, then you have to make a decision that what you're going to do with it. And for me, I keep saying that for me, the greatest gift, the greatest gift is to find what your passion is, and what you're good at and what you want to do. But the blessing is to be able to give your gift to the world. So for me, this is where the area comes into play, where I say, inspired by showing that you have gone and walked the walk. You have gone through the trials and tribulation, and you're still going through, because so long as you're alive, you always have challenges. But how do you reconcile between the vision that you have of yourself and your perception of what is it that you come to do in this world, and how do you work your way to deliver this promise, to be this blessing to the world? And I keep saying, in my tradition, Congo, in Africa, mainly, the Bantu people, we have naming ceremony when a child is born, but it's so important, the name we give, because the name is kind of like your mission statement. So you are born and you have a mission, and your mission statement is encapsulated in your name. So my name, Diambi, means the bearer of good news. So, hey, if this is my mission statement, I better find good news to deliver, and I better know where to go to deliver those news so that they can be welcome. So it's a part of basically saying, I am born as a promise, just like everyone else is born as a promise. I can see those parents. I have two sons, and I remember when I held my son for the first time, I say, wow. And then you can have your imagination thinking, what is he going to become? Of course, we can be off, but that's okay. But he's still born as a promise to this world. So I believe everyone is born as a promise. And then the life is only so that we can unfold that promise and see that promise manifest, and then be the witness to others manifesting their promises, and you being also witness to manifest yours. So for me, this is what I feel like is really important when you work and you do what you got to do, and then you go to the pitfalls and you pick yourself up, and you have a network of people that's supportive of you to continue cheering you on, and you doing the same, because it's always a two-way street. And then here you blossoming, and you becoming, the promise that you are born to be. So if I'm a promise, I was born to be a promise of good news. I want to find the good news. I know the world is it's pretty tough, and I see suffering every day, and especially when I go home to Africa, and not just Africa, but I was in Panama recently, and I saw a lot of difficulties and poverty and injustice, and so much turmoil and torments in this world. But if you are born to be a promise of good news, that's what you see. And that's what you see as being your opportunity to become a good news, by finding a solution to make sure that you alleviate some pain, you become, a tool to manifest, solutions to help people.
Well, I'm feeling the good news from across the world and across the ocean, and your energy is so contagious, and I would love to talk to you all day. I can't believe we're almost wrapping things up here, but it's such an amazing privilege to have you on the show. Is there anything that you haven't mentioned yet in any of the categories that we talked about today, but with a focus on kind of leading and inspiring, that you'd like to share with the audience, the listeners today?
I would say trust. That's my own belief, of course. I think that there is this intelligence, that's the universe in which we all evolve and blossom, and this bubble in this universe is intelligent. I think there is a strength and an intelligence, and there is a design. And of course, the design may be very remote from our understanding, but I trust that once we put ourselves in that level, once we decide that, yes, I believe and I feel that there is an intelligence for everything that I see around me to be manifested, then I am also part of that design. And so I just want to become a tool. And I want to serve, I want to make a statement, this is what I want to do, then I can attune myself to that intelligence and breathe together with it. And then eventually things get a little easier. So meaning that life is tough, but when you trust and when you have faith that you're doing a good thing, things will be okay.
And surrender and go with the flow, as they say, but with the right intention, and and connection. And speaking of connection, how can people best stay connected with you, with your mission, with your vision? Is there one good website that people can go to, or how would you recommend people stay connected to you or get a hold of you if they so
Yes,
desire?
absolutely. So I do have the foundation, the Elikia Hope Foundation. And so the website is the Elikia Hope Foundation. Maybe I'll send you, the correct link. So
Yep, we'll put it up on magic of technology. Look, it's on the screen right now.
It's on the screen right now. So theelikiahopefoundation.org, and it's in New York. It's a small, non-for-profit, also kind of like a peer-to-peer type help, because I do go myself to the Congo. I buy the stuff, I give them to the orphanages, I go get the motorcycles, I film everything, I send the donors videos and stuff. So it's really still like a peer-to-peer type humanitarian work that I'm doing. And then I have the HRH Queen Diambi .com. That is my website. I will have soon another one, but that's the one that is actual now. And then you can have email addresses where you can send out information or require information. It's info@queendiambi.org.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you again for joining us and taking the time to be with us here today. Thank all of you for joining us as well. For more great resources to help you become your best self, including free worksheets and downloads, make sure to check out thebuildframework.com. That's it for this episode. I'm JP. We'll see you next time on The Build Show.